we're heading towards an election. And at that election, regional seats, I believe, will determine who is the government.
Barnaby Joyce says his weekend reshuffle of the Nationals in Cabinet was all about beating Labor. But it was difficult not to see a pattern in the promotions and sackings that suggested another motivation.
There are people who supported me who are now within Cabinet, out of Cabinet and Assistant Ministry, and there are people who didn't support me. 100%.
It's called democracy.
Key McCormack backers Darren Chester and Mark Coulton were demoted. And while Keith Pitt will still be Minister for the precious Nats portfolios of water and resources, he will no longer be in the Cabinet. No big deal, according to Joyce.
The resources industry still gets to ask questions at question time. It still is on the blue carpet.
Then there is the return of Bridget McKenzie, just over a year after she resigned over her involvement in the sports rorts scandal.
I take responsibility for all my decisions.
McKenzie and the PM both said she had to go because she was a member of a gun club that received funding under the scheme, not because of the broader scandal over what the National Audit Office described as a biased allocation of grants in marginal and target electorates. Emails revealed the Prime Minister's office had been deeply involved, requesting tweaks to the scheme even in the 24 hours before the PM called the election on April 11. Less than 20 minutes after the Parliament was dissolved, came an email from Senator McKenzie's office noting it had agreed to the suggested changes earlier that morning at 7:13am. There will no doubt be intense scrutiny of any similar grant programs rolled out in the coming campaign, but today the government was looking a bit further into the future with the release of the Intergenerational Report.
It's not a guarantee of what will be, but an insight into what could be.
The report reveals the pandemic will have a long-term effect on population growth. Australia will be much smaller in the 2050s than previously forecast. Treasurer Josh Frydenberg joined me earlier from Melbourne. Treasurer, the Intergenerational Report shows just how profound the impact of COVID-19 has been on the economy and on the projections for the economy. It's talking about lower migration and population, lower growth, lower incomes for decades to come, essentially a completely different economy to the one any of us have really experienced in our lifetimes. What thought has the government put in to what sort of changes in policy that implies?
Well, what this intergenerational report underlines is how important productivity growth is going to be to the future prosperity of Australia. And we are focused on a series of microeconomic reforms, whether it's in relation to the digital platforms, superannuation, cutting red tape, for example, the legislation that passed through the Parliament just last week around mutual recognition of occupational licences, the investment incentives that we put in the budget, the job trainer program to boost skills, and training. All of these programs are designed to boost the productivity of the nation, which is going to be so critical.
And with respect, Treasurer, that's going to require a much bigger change than just getting rid of red tape and a few changes about super. I mean, this is a profound change in the nature of growth drivers in the economy. What
comes through in this IGR report is that the Australian population will reach 38.8 million by the end of that 40-year period in 2060-61. That's around 6 years later than what was originally forecast back in the 2015 IGR, and that is because population growth has slowed during COVID. And even though we get back in 24-25 to the net overseas migration numbers that we've seen previously, we don't recover that lost ground. And as you know, migration tends to bring younger people into the community at a younger age than the existing population. So not only does it lead to Australia being smaller, but also being older as a result of COVID-19.
Well, let's talk about the more immediate impact which is reflected in the IGR. You spoke in March about the appropriate level of support for the economy at that point being very targeted and very temporary as the virus was suppressed and the vaccine was rolled out. But these things aren't happening now, and last year's stimulus is now washing out of the system. Does the breakout of the Delta variant around the country suggest you need to rethink whether the government needs to provide some ongoing support to the economy on some level, that you need to, as John Howard would say, abandon the ideology and go with what the economy needs?
Well, 2 points in response, Laura. The first is that the JobKeeper program, which was our major economic support program during a crisis at a cost of $90 billion, was always temporary and was emergency support, and we took the right decision to end that, and we've seen unemployment actually come down since the end of JobKeeper. But the second point is that we anticipated that there would be lockdowns, that there would be outbreaks, and that is why we continued the economic support in the budget delivered just a few weeks ago with $41 billion of direct economic support. But it's of a different nature than those emergency support payments like JobKeeper and the cash flow boost.
The government has said that, has expressed a willingness to get quarantine facilities built in at least 3 states late last week. How should we think about these facilities? Are they extra capacity or are they a sort of a development of the system so that you can actually separate people at high risk of exposure to low risk? And there's pressure in the National Cabinet discussion today to separate domestic quarantine and international quarantine travellers.
Well, these designated facilities should be seen as supplementing as opposed to replacing hotel quarantine. Hotel quarantine has been largely effective. There's been over 370,000 people that have come through the hotel quarantine process since COVID began last year. We, as you say, have written to the states of Queensland and Western Australia and reaching agreement with Victoria about a designated facility. This is over and above the $500 million we put in the budget for the extension of the Howard Springs facility.
You've been very critical of Victoria about its lockdowns. Now that we've got lockdowns all around the country, can you reflect on whether these could have been avoided if the federal government had got the vaccine rollout right in the first place?
Well, we are rolling out the vaccine as quickly as possible. There are some things we can control and some things we can't. As you know, with the AstraZeneca vaccine, there's been issues, and that has not been just for here in Australia, but it's been something that has affected the distribution of that vaccine right around the world. And we're getting more Pfizer vaccines every week, from 300,000 a week to up to 600,000 a week, and we're making those vaccines available.
Treasurer, just on the cabinet reshuffle, have there been any consequences for any minister who has faced questions about sexual harassment, sexual misconduct or failure to protect women in their workplaces?
Well, again, if you're raising issues with respect to my colleagues, those have worked through the appropriate processes. With respect to the reshuffle recently, Barnaby Joyce has been selected by his party room to lead the National Party, and as the captain of his team, he gets to decide his lineup, subject, of course, to the final approval by the Prime Minister. I look forward to working with the new cabinet ministers in Bridget McKenzie and Andrew Gee, and obviously Barnaby as the leader of the National Party. And I also pay tribute to the great work that both Keith Pitt and Darren Chester did in their respective portfolios when they were in cabinet, as well as, of course, Michael McCormack, a good friend, a good colleague, and a very decent person.
Treasurer, thanks for your time.
My pleasure.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 7:30's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.